Hey everyone, welcome back to White Sparrow Living, Luke 12:6. I'm Wendy, and today is the final episode number 3 of doing some fall decor for my sister's living room. So let's get started. So this sweet little Dollar Tree sign didn't quite make it all the way home in one piece, so there was a piece already broken off when I got it, but I'm going to take it all apart. I think it's really cute, and I had planned to use the decals or, the paper that was already on there because I really liked the colors. It wasn't exactly going to coordinate with what we had in my sister's living room going already, but I thought it was soft and subtle enough that it would still work. So they were a little bit bent, and I was trying to straighten them out, and then on one, kind of off camera, you can see I'm going to bend it a little bit to make it straighter, and it accidentally broke. So all of my plans were completely thwarted, and there was no fixing this. I didn't have one that was small enough that would match, and so I didn't know what I was going to do. So you won't have to do this part if you keep this sign all intact. But what I ended up doing to fix this was take some painter's tape. This is that really large one, so I was able to tape it back together. But now I have a different surface, and I'm not going to have the paper covering that's going to match the other two arrows. So what I decided to do after tracing this out with my craft knife and getting that completely covered with the painter's tape was to paint them all in a different color and basically just start from scratch. So I'm going to take this Dollar Tree pot that you've seen 70 times before, and I'm going to paint it with my Waverly chalk paint in white. And I added just a touch of some truffle chalk paint and just let that mix and kind of get shaded in there together. So it looked a little bit rusticy and worn and super, super pretty. Normally I would take off the first couple of layers of the jute twine, but I decided to leave it in this case. And then I'll use that same method with a Dollar Tree plunger handle and give it that same look with the truffle and white. So then I started painting my arrows, and as you can see, I covered all of them with that painter's tape so that they'd all have the same texture, or once I paint them, they all have that same look. And I did one a little bit lighter, one a little bit darker, but still I'm going to be painting on these with some white paint pen. So I wanted to make sure that that painting is going to still be able to be seen on those arrows. When I first painted it, it was getting a little bit muddy, and I didn't like the shade of orange. So I just kind of toned it down and got it a little bit brighter by adding some more white. And you can just play with these until you get it to the shade that you want. And then once they were completely dry, I did some sanding along the edges just so that it didn't look freshly painted. And then I'm going to take my white paint pen, and I wrote hay rides on one, pumpkin patch on another, and then corn maze on the third one. And then I used 3 different fonts or writing on each of them just to give it some more cuteness. And of course you could use your Cricut or cutting machine that you have. I just decided this was a little bit quicker, and short words are a little bit easier, and especially if they're just going straight across. So I just decided to do it by hand. So now it's time to put this together, and I'm just going to take a big block of styrofoam from the Dollar Tree and mush that into my pot. And then I'm going to make a hole where my plunger is going to go ultimately. I just pushed it into the styrofoam, and then I'm going to pull it back out so that I can first attach my arrows to the plunger. So I want to put a little bit of greenery at the top of my sign. So I'm going to see how tall my top arrow is going to go so that I can make something using my amaranthus greenery, not the spider leg part itself, but just the greenery that comes with it. And it's more of an orangery, but it looks really fall and pretty. And then I'm going to use these little cattails from another sprig and just put those all together and make a little fall piece with a pine cone and whatever I can find. And these are mostly all scraps, so it's only going to take a little bit to put at the top. So I'm going to use a nylon zip tie to attach those together. And then again, I'm going to use some scrap ribbon from my little bin and just take some small pieces that are in the beiges and browns. And I have some Dollar Tree, you know, the polka dot burlap one. And I'll use a little bit of that Walmart drop cloth and just whatever I had available that looked pretty together and coordinated with those neutral tones of this project. And so once I put those all together, I'm going to use a chenille stem to do that, and then I'll attach it to the front part of my little sprig and then attach the whole thing to the top of my plunger handle. So I decided to go ahead and put my plunger into my styrofoam, and I'm just going to use some hot glue to secure it in place. It stays pretty snug as a bug in a rug, but it might move around after a while. So then once I get it in there, I'm going to put all of my Spanish moss at the top to cover up that styrofoam. And the styrofoam block is big enough that I didn't have to use a lot of my Spanish moss, but I just used hot glue to get that secured on top. So now I'm laying it on top of the package of Spanish moss so that it's sitting up because it's in the pot now. And then I'm going to determine where I'm going to put my arrows, and I'll hot glue those to my plunger handle. Now you could use a brad or a screw or nails, whatever you want, to get this even more sturdy, but I would definitely recommend adding some permanent adhesive as well. But this way I'm able to see where my bow is and all of that messiness right there so that I can put it where it's going to show and be super cutie patootie. So now, because I had a messy bow at the top already, I knew I didn't want to add a bow at the bottom, but I found these Dollar Tree mushrooms, and I think these are so adorable. So I'm just going to take a skewer and stick one of those into the styrofoam at the bottom. I just thought it looked a little bit plain. And then I'm going to take a couple of these mini hay bales and hot glue those to the side. And once I say this, I thought these kind of afterwards looked a little bit like really big croutons. So, but they're hay bales, so you can add this or not. But I still think it's super cutie patootie if you don't think of them as croutons. And then I'll take a little bit more of that amaranthus greenery and pop it right in the top, and it's done. And here it is, all finished, and I think this is so adorable. I'm so happy with how this turned out. And this is one of those times when something bad happened, you can make beauty for ashes. And so I'm kind of glad that I did break that one arrow so that it turned into this. But the other way would be super cute too. Anyway, I love how this turned out, and I hope you guys like it too. So now I'm going to use this super cute little beaded pumpkin that my sister picked up at the Dollar Tree. And you've seen this channel do 70-11 different banners. We're going to use some of Dollar Tree's burlap banners. And then I'm going to couple that with some coordinating fabrics. I have some of my sheet that I use as fabric. That's a really budget-friendly way of getting a lot of fabric for a very little amount of money. And you can see it's very fall and neutral and super pretty. And then of course, the biggest bang for your buck is Walmart drop cloth if you need that muslin look and the soft colors. And then I have this burlapfabric.com placemat. They call it a napkin, but it's got the flour sack stripe on it. I'm going to use that. I only had one. And then I'm going to use some burlap. Again, this is something that I have yards and yards of that was gifted to me. So I'm going to start with some jute twine. And here you see I have a sweet little pink basket full of my different jute twines, but you can also see that I'm running low on it. Now this is some twine that I pulled off of one of those tin buckets, the same kind that we used in our last project. So I just pulled that off and knew I was going to use it at some point. And remember, it's not hoarding if you use it. So I'm going to take my little burlap banners, and the only bummer about this is that when you move these around too much, or you can see burlap just generally has a lot of fraying that happens. But I found that these really came apart, especially at the top when I was feeding it onto the twine. So just be careful, or maybe even use something different. But you'll see how it turns out. It's still super cutie patootie. So I'm going to take my different fabrics and I'm going to cut those into strips. These come out to about 12 inches each length. It doesn't have to be perfect or the same width, but you know, I'm generally just trying to make it kind of close, but not exactly. There's no precision in this whatsoever. So once I get these all cut down, and after my banners are all fed onto my twine, I'm going to just start tying those 12-inch strips onto the jute twine. And I alternated the different fabrics so that I had, you know, a burlap, then one from the sheet, then one from the drop cloth. And I went across in between each of those banners 13 times. I don't know why it was 13, but it just came out that way. Anyway, and then I took a little bit of some 5/8 inch jute ribbon, also from the Dollar Tree, and I just put 3 intermittently in between those other strips. Now, when you tie these in the middle and just let them hang, they're going to kind of go all over the place, which is what I wanted. I just wanted it to look real messy, and I didn't do any dovetailing on the bottom or anything like that. I just wanted them to be straight across. And of course, you can do it any way that you want. But if you did want a more tame look, you can always double over those strips, feed the loop side behind the twine, and then feed your tails in through that loop. And then your little tassels will just hang there, and it's a little more neat looking, I guess, but you can do it with whatever style you want to. I just wanted to show you how to do it that way too. So as you know, this is for my sister's fireplace, and this is her fireplace, but I don't know exactly how long it was. Here's another picture of it, but just to get an idea of how big it actually is, that's me up on the top when I decorated for Christmas a number of years ago, but you can see how big it is, but I need to make it adjustable. So on one side, I'm going to have the twine, and then I'll start with my first banner, and then at the end, for my last banner, the fourth one, I'm going to add my 13 little tie-on pieces of fabric. And then I'm going to add in the middle the beaded pumpkin, and I'll tie the extra jute at the end after the little tassels onto the left side. And on the other side, I'll do the exact same thing. I'll add my 13 tassels, and then I'll go after the fourth banner, I'll end there, and that'll just be blank jute twine. Do you see what I'm saying? And then that way I'll be able to hang it from the two sides, and then my pumpkin, I'm gonna hang right in the middle. But this way I can adjust it too. And you can see here, I'm going to cover up that stem on the little beaded pumpkin with some burlap ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I'm just going to glue that on there and get it a little bit cuter. And then I took some jute twine because my sister has some hooks that are on top of the mantle so that you can't see them. So whenever we do garland or Christmas lights or whatever, there's a place to hang it onto, and then it'll just hang over the edge and you don't see any ugly hooks. So I'm adding some jute twine to the back part of my pumpkin, and there's a little round piece that is part of just how it's made. So I'm gonna attach it to that and then just let that hang. So when I go to install it, I'll be able to see how tall, you know, I need it to be. So what's gonna happen is my little pumpkin is gonna hang in the middle, and then I'll have 2 swoops on each side of the banner itself. So you'll see it at the end, but obviously if you don't have a fireplace that's that long, like if it was just mine, I would just go all the way across. Well, I probably would put that pumpkin in the middle, but my side pieces wouldn't have to be so long. Okay. Now, having said that, I'm going to take a little strip of my drop cloth and some jute twine and just tie a sweet little bow onto the top just to give it some more cuteness. And then we'll do that tying, like I said, and I'm going to leave this a little bit loose so that when I do get to her house, I'll be able to adjust it to the length that I need it to be, and that my swoops, I can adjust those too. You know what swoops are, right? When I'm letting it hang and swoop in that sweet curve. I'll show you in the reveal. It's not in her house, it's just on my wall, but it's super long, but it's super pretty. But of course, adjust this to the size of wherever you're putting it, and it doesn't have to go on a mantle either, so there's always that. So now you have the option. I'm going to put some scriptures on each of my 8 banners. Now you can use a white paint pen, and that's what I was going to do, But then I decided to go ahead and make this permanent, and well, I mean, the pin would be permanent too, but I don't know, I guess just better writing. So I'm going to use my Cricut and some iron-on vinyl. And so I just did a bunch of thankful and harvest scriptures on my Cricut design space, and then I'm going to cut those out in the mirror image using that iron-on smart vinyl, and then I'm going to use my heat press and iron those onto each of my banners. Now again, because the burlap fabric has, you know, the bumpity bumps of the burlap itself, I had tested out with my paint pen and it looks okay and that would work, but I just didn't like it as much as the solid look. So I just cut those out. It didn't take me very much time, and the extra time that it did take, I think, is worth it, especially since it's, you know, God's word. So that's pretty important. And I'll have all of the 8 scriptures that I have in this project in the description box below. So if you want to do this or any other projects, it's kind of handy to have those scriptures all ready to go. So they're there if you need it. And then to press these on, I have the Cricut heat press guide linked on my computer. So I can just go right to it and then pick the material that I'm using. And for the burlap, it says to preheat the burlap for 5 seconds. And then once you take the iron off, you'll put the decal down and then put your iron on that for 30 seconds at 315. And then once that 30 seconds is up, you have to wait for it to cool down before trying to lift the backing sheet off. Now, sometimes it was trying to pull up on me, and you can either try it some more or go longer or whatever, but I think what the trick is really letting it cool all the way down and then pulling it off. But I also used my scraper to kind of push it onto the burlap also. So you'll get it on there. It just takes a little time, and I used my nails sometimes to get the letters started. But anyway, so here it is all finished, and I think this is so pretty. As I look back now at the picture of her fireplace, this might be a little bit too long, but we're gonna make it work, and I'll just mush those all together to get them closer together. But as you can see too, it would be pretty like even on a window or over the fireplace. It's just so pretty. Anyway, I love it, and I hope you guys like it too. For this project, I'm going to be using this pumpkin yard stake, and I've used this in another project before. I just love how pretty it is. And then I'm also going to be using these 2 stand-up Dollar Tree pumpkins. And then originally I was going to use 2 of these bath mats. Well, one is actually a scrap piece, but that it has a little square on it, so I was just going to use that middle portion, but I have to change that. You'll see in a minute. So I'm going to take my heat gun and get that glue heated up so that I can pull that pumpkin out of the stand, because I'm just going to be using the 2 pumpkins without the stand. And so you just have to be a little patient with this. I didn't even have to use my hammer once I saw that, you know, it was warm enough to just pull out there. And then I used my Cricut spatula to get the little sunflower off. And I have a little box for those chipboard pieces that, you know, are extras or that I take off. One day I'll use it. And so I'm going to get all the ickies off at the bottom. Now here's where it went awry. You can see how wide that middle portion is on the one bath mat, but the other one, it wasn't as wide. It was almost like an inch smaller, so it didn't fit over the entire pumpkin, and I didn't want that. And I think it turns out a little bit better anyway. So, you know, those happy accidents are sometimes good. So instead, I'm going to use some more of that burlapfabric.com napkin and then a scrap piece of my Walmart drop cloth. So because the little napkin is a little bit thinner, you could see the orange coming through. So I just pulled that off, and then I'm going to take some glue, and it's just whatever this is. Somebody gifted this to me too. I just have the sweetest people that send me stuff. And so anyway, I'm going to use this kind of as your Mod Podge, I guess, and just glue my fabrics onto the pumpkins. Now the drop cloth one, you know, that fabric is really thick, so you couldn't really see through that one. So I just put that right on top, and you see I cut out the shapes of the pumpkins just by setting it down and drawing around it. And then I'll do the same thing with that placemat. And I love flower sack stripe fabric, and I think this is so pretty. And then to cover the edges, I used some more of that same jute twine. Or no, actually this is a wired jute twine, and I just pulled the wire out of it, and it was the perfect size, so it covered that up really nicely. So I'll do that on both of my pumpkins, and I did it all the way around. And then once I get to the top, I'm going to go ahead and cover the whole stem, but you kind of won't see that when we're done. It just gave it a finished look. So now to finish the stems, I'm just going to take some more of that wired jute, and this is what it looks like. I don't know what it was from. I guess I must have bought it like this. I'm not sure. But here I am pulling out the wire so you can just see, and then you can keep that wire for something else. And so I'm just going to cut these down in little strips. I just measured to see how long I wanted my stem to be, and then I'll just glue those on one by one going vertically. And then at the bottom, I'm just going to kind of fray them so it looks like a sweet little pumpkin stem. So now to make the lines of my pumpkins, I'm just going to take 4 pieces of that same wired jute, and this time I'm going to leave that wire inside of it, and then I'll just take some hot glue and tuck the top part under my little stem where the frayed edges are, and then go down with my hot glue, and then it gives it an easier curve with the wire left in it. And then at the bottom I'll just fold that over, and then I'll do that for all 4 pieces. So now to finish off our pumpkins, I'm going to take a small little piece of burlap ribbon from the Dollar Tree and dovetail the edges. And then I'm going to take the extra straw raffia that was on the stand-up pumpkins that I pulled off. I'm going to wrap that with the straw and then put that at the top of my pumpkins. So now here's where I'm going to take my metal pumpkin, and I'm going to get the stake off of here. And you can see I was testing my pen here to see how the metal was going to take it before, I write on it on the front. So I'm going to take that stake and pull it up and then just start moving it back and forth so that I can pop that off. Now these do come without the stake, and so you can pick these up without having to do this, but I wanted to go ahead and use this for this project instead of using it as a stake. So I'm going to move the little leaf and the tendrils out of the way, and then I'm using my gold paint pen. I'll have all of my pens and supplies linked in the description box below, but I'm going to write down the scripture, "The harvest is plenty, but the laborers are few." And that's Matthew 9:37, and it's just the first part, so we're going to put A next to it. And then I'm going to take some truffle and white chalk paint and paint my stem and my leaf. And I'm just going to mix that together, and the tendrils too, just to make it not the silver, so that it'll go better with my 2 pumpkins. And I'll just use the same paintbrush and put my truffle color down first, and then go back in with the white and let it get nice and all blended in to give it some dimension. And then because my pumpkin's already pretty busy, I'm going to take another piece of that raffia and just make a sweet little bow at the top. And then to put it together, I took a straight edge and I'm going to make sure that my pumpkins are the same level. And then I'll take a couple of Jenga pieces and hot glue those to the sides of my pumpkins. And that's going to give it a little lifter and something to adhere to my top pumpkin, which is going to be that metal one. So after I get those down, I'm going to put my metal one right on top of those. And you do want to add some permanent adhesive and let that dry overnight because mine did come apart, so I had to add that later. Now, I had this wine box that my aunt had in, well, actually my uncle had. I mean, I guess it would be my aunt and my uncle, but it was in my uncle's garage. But I love this box and I wanted to use it. I've been wanting to use it and I thought this would be a perfect time for this project for my sister. But I didn't want to just have it be seasonal only. So I'm going to make it to where she can use it throughout the year. So I took some antique wax and added some water to it to kind of dilute it. And then I'm going to brush it on with my paintbrush and then wipe it off with a towel, or, you know, a messy towel. And then that way the etchings on it, I don't know what it says, Farniente. I don't know what kind of wine this is, but I guess that's what it's called. But the house on it is so pretty, so I didn't want to lose that and not, you know, have it be used all year round. So once my pumpkins are now all dry, I'm going to take some Dollar Tree little hooks, and this has the adhesive on the back. Now my whole little piece is pretty light, so I was okay with just using the adhesive that's on there. You could add some hot glue just to make it a little more secure, but I'm going to apply them upside down because I'm going to hang this over the front edge of my wine box. And then we can use this for blankets or whatever. When we get it to my sister's house, we'll use it for blankets and things, but I'm going to style it a little bit differently, and I'll show you in just a second. But this way we can put it onto the box, use it for, you know, your fall decor, and then after the season's over, we can pull this off and just use it all year round. And here it is all finished, and I absolutely love how this turned out, and I'm going to give it to my sister. You know, it's not without a little bit of difficulty because it is something that I love and I would love to have in my home. And here it is staged with my rosary that I made with that quilling. It's kind of gone through it because the kids like to play with it. And then I have my Jesus picture walking on water. There's a bale of hay in there, some Walmart leaves, and then this buffalo check pumpkin that I didn't make, but I got from Ross Dress for Less a couple of years ago. And then just some old books and some eucalyptus leaves. But I love, love, love how this turned out. And I'm also happy that it is going to my sister, since there is some sentimental value in this because it was my aunt and uncle's. But I love how it turned out, and I hope you guys like it too. I hope you guys enjoyed all of these projects. And if you did, don't forget to give them a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think. If you're not already, I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button down below, as well as the little bell right next to it, so that you can be notified every time I upload a brand new video. Don't forget the reason for the season. I hope everyone has a blessed day, and remember to always be the light. Bye.